What if I told you that the God of the Bible, the all-powerful creator of heaven and earth, began as a metal-working deity of a small desert tribe? What if everything you've been taught about Yahweh's origins has been carefully filtered, sanitized, and reconstructed to hide a truth that would fundamentally challenge modern religious understanding? Today, we're going to examine archaeological evidence that mainstream theologians don't want you to see. Evidence that reveals Yahweh wasn't originally the supreme God of Israel, but something far more earthly and human. This isn't speculation. It's written in stone, preserved in ancient texts, and hidden in plain sight within the Bible itself. Picture a world where Yahweh is a nobody, where he doesn't even exist in ancient Israel. Not yet. The gods ruling the land are El, the wise creator, his consort Asherah, and the storm-wielding Baal. So how does this upstart God Yahweh appear seemingly out of nowhere and end up on the throne? This mystery runs deeper than most biblical scholars are willing to admit. The 7 secrets about Yahweh they don't teach you. There are 7 explosive secrets about Yahweh that Orthodox religious scholars rarely address. Secrets that challenge the very foundation of monotheistic traditions. With each revelation, we'll peel back another layer of religious orthodoxy to expose the historical reality beneath. What you won't find in Sunday school or seminary textbooks is that the earliest mentions of Yahweh place him not in Jerusalem, not among the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but in remote mining regions of the Sinai Peninsula and ancient Edom. The Bible itself contains this admission, though it's carefully obscured in translation and tradition. What they tell you versus what the evidence shows. What they tell you, Yahweh has always been the one true God of Israel, the eternal creator who revealed himself to Abraham. What the evidence shows, Yahweh was a regional deity who only became associated with Israel centuries after the Exodus narrative supposedly took place. The oldest archaeological evidence doesn't place him in Israel at all. What they tell you, monotheism was the original religion that devolved into polytheism. What the evidence shows, Israel's religious identity evolved from polytheism to henotheism to monotheism, with Yahweh gradually absorbing the attributes of other gods, especially El. What they tell you, Yahweh's nature has always been that of a transcendent creator God. What the evidence shows, Yahweh bears all the hallmarks of a metallurgical deity, tied to fire, copper smelting, and the transformative power of heat, a god forged in flame, not unlike the Greco-Roman Vulcan or Hephaestus. A journey through time and sacred geography. Our investigation will take us on a journey spanning 3 continents and nearly 4,000 years of human history. We'll glide past the Dead Sea into the rugged hills of Judea, where Yahweh has some roots but is not the only deity in town. There's another God hiding in the background with a shocking connection to Yahweh that could flip everything you thought you knew. From there, we'll travel to Edom, the realm of Kos. Some scholars whisper that Kos and Yahweh might be one and the same. In the copper-smelting region of Timnah, under the blazing sun, we'll see how Yahweh could have emerged like a god forged in fire, flames, molten metal, and all the drama of a divine blacksmith. But this fiery birth is just the start. We'll head east to Midian, where Moses fled after his Exodus fiasco, marrying into a family of Yahweh worshippers. The Midianites hold a key piece of Yahweh's story, one that's going to make you rethink everything about this God's past. We'll trek across the Sinai to Kuntilet Idrud, where an ancient inscription stuns us. Yahweh and his Asherah. Yes, Yahweh might have had a goddess by his side, something they definitely didn't teach you in Sunday school. Our journey will even take us to the Aegean Islands, where remarkable parallels between Yahweh and Dionysos suggest connections that challenge the very boundaries between Eastern and Western religious traditions. By the end of this investigation, you'll never look at biblical religion the same way again. The transformation of a tribal metallurgical deity into the supreme God of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam might be the greatest story never fully told, until now. Are you ready to discover the forbidden origins of Yahweh? Before we can understand Yahweh's rise to power, we must first understand who actually ruled the religious landscape of ancient Canaan. The Israelites were once a Canaanite people, and their original pantheon was vastly different from the monotheistic religion we know today. El and the Canaanite pantheon, the true original gods of Israel. At the head of the Canaanite divine assembly sat El, not Yahweh. El was the wise creator god, the father of years, depicted as an elderly, bearded figure whose name literally meant God in most Semitic languages. He was the supreme deity, the father of all gods including Baal, and husband to the goddess Asherah, the queen of heaven. El's history stretches back far beyond Israel's emergence, through the Amorites and even further into Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization where writing first emerged. Archaeological discoveries from Ugarit reveal extensive mythological texts showing El presiding over a divine council, making decisions that affected the cosmos and humanity. This is not speculative history. It's written in clay tablets, preserved in stone, and even echoed within the Bible itself. In Genesis, the patriarchs repeatedly worship El Shaddai, El Elyon, and El Roy. These weren't alternative names for Yahweh. They were titles of El that were later absorbed into Yahweh's identity. What's striking is that while El's history can be traced back through millennia of continuous worship, Yahweh appears to have no comparable ancient pedigree. Where are Yahweh's parents? His divine family? His origin stories from early Canaanite texts? The silence is deafening and telling. The first traces of Yahweh, Egyptian hieroglyphs and desert inscriptions. Secret number 1. Yahweh was not originally the God of Israel. The oldest known mention of Yahweh doesn't come from Israel at all. It comes from Egyptian hieroglyphic inscriptions dating to the 14th and 13th centuries BCE, the reigns of Amenhotep III and Ramesses III. These texts don't reference Yahweh as the God of Israel, but rather as a deity associated with nomadic tribes called the Shasu in the regions of Edom and Midian. The hieroglyphs spell out YHW in the land of the Shasu, placing Yahweh's earliest known worship far from Jerusalem, in the copper-rich desert wilderness where metallurgy flourished. When properly pronounced, the name appears as Yahoo or Yahu, a critical detail that will become profoundly important later in our investigation. The next significant evidence comes from the Mesha stele, a Moabite inscription from around 840 BCE. King Mesha of Moab boasts of capturing the vessels of Yahweh after conquering the city of Nebo from Israel, suggesting Yahweh had by then become associated with the northern kingdom. Most shockingly, inscriptions from Kuntilat Adrud, dated 800 to 750 BCE, mention both Yahweh of Samaria and Yahweh of Teman, suggesting that different regional manifestations of Yahweh were worshipped simultaneously, a polytheistic conception of Yahweh completely at odds with later monotheism. These inscriptions also include blessings in the name of Yahweh and his Asherah, suggesting that Yahweh, like El before him, had a divine consort. This female companion was systematically erased from later biblical traditions, but the archaeological evidence speaks clearly. Secret number 2. Yahweh emerged from the wilderness, not Jerusalem. One of the Bible's most telling passages appears in Exodus 6, 2-3, where God says to Moses, "I am Yahweh. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as El Shaddai, but by my name, Yahweh, I did not make myself known to them." This extraordinary admission, hiding in plain sight, acknowledges that the patriarchs didn't know the name Yahweh. They worshipped El under various titles, and only later was this new deity Yahweh introduced. The text attempts to reconcile this discrepancy by claiming Yahweh and El are the same God, but archaeology tells a different story. Ancient biblical poetry preserves even more startling evidence. In Deuteronomy 33:2 and Judges 5:4-5, some of the oldest texts in the Bible, Yahweh is described as coming from Seir, Edom, Mount Paran, and the fields of Edom, precisely matching the regions where Egyptian texts first located the worship of Yahweh among the Shasu tribes. The journey from the smelting furnace to the Temple Mount. How did Yahweh make this remarkable journey? From a regional deity of metal workers in the southern wilderness to the supreme God of Jerusalem and eventually the world. The transformation wasn't sudden, but occurred through a gradual process spanning centuries. During the early Iron Age, 1200 to 900 BCE, as the Israelite identity was forming in the highlands of Canaan, something extraordinary happened. The worship of Yahweh, previously limited to southern regions, began to spread northward and merge with the worship of El. This religious evolution coincided with significant political developments, the formation of the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, suggesting that Yahweh's elevation may have been tied to political unification efforts. As new kingdoms needed new national identities, Yahweh provided a distinctive divine patron that differentiated Israelites from their Canaanite neighbors. But Yahweh didn't replace El overnight. Instead, he gradually absorbed El's characteristics, titles, and mythological roles. This syncretism is preserved within the Bible itself, where Yahweh inexplicably takes on attributes previously associated exclusively with El, creator of the world, father figure, ancient of days, and head of the divine council. What makes this merger particularly fascinating is that it wasn't simply a matter of changing names. Yahweh and El originated as deities with fundamentally different natures, domains, and myths. El was the remote creator god, while Yahweh, as we're about to discover, was something far more elemental and visceral, a god of fire, transformation, and metallurgical power. The evidence points clearly to a startling conclusion. The God worshipped by billions today began his divine career not as the creator of heaven and earth, but as a regional deity associated with metal smelting in the copper-rich regions south of the Dead Sea. And as we'll see in our next section, this metallurgical origin explains many of Yahweh's most distinctive characteristics that persist even in modern religious conceptions. Secret number 3. The Kenite connection. Yahweh's original worshippers. The most compelling evidence for Yahweh's metallurgical origins comes from his connection to a little-known tribe called the Kenites. First proposed by theologian F.W. Gilleney in 1862, the Kenite hypothesis suggests that Yahweh was originally the god of these enigmatic desert metalworkers before the Israelites adopted his worship. The Bible itself preserves this crucial connection. When Moses fled Egypt, he found refuge with a Kenite priest named Jethro, also called Roel, in Midian. It was in this copper-rich region that Moses first encountered Yahweh at the burning bush, a theophany strikingly appropriate for a metallurgical deity. After the Exodus, Moses' Kenite father-in-law instructs him on proper worship of Yahweh, suggesting the Kenites were already devotees of this god, while the Israelites were still unfamiliar with him. The very name Kenite derives from Cain, meaning smith or metalworker in ancient Semitic languages. Archaeological evidence confirms that the regions associated with the Kenites, Edom, Midian, and the Negev, were centers of copper production during the late Bronze and early Iron Ages. The Kenites weren't just any tribe. They were specialized craftsmen whose mastery of metallurgy gave them elevated status and influence far beyond their numbers. This connection explains why the Bible consistently portrays the Kenites as allied with Israel, despite being non-Israelites. Judges 1:16 describes them moving into Israelite territory, while 1 Samuel 15:6 shows Saul specifically warning the Kenites to separate themselves from the Amalekites before battle. For you showed kindness to all the Israelites when they came up out of Egypt. This special relationship makes perfect sense if the Kenites introduced Yahweh worship to the early Israelites. The ancient art of metallurgy, when men became like gods. To understand why a metallurgical deity would rise to such prominence, we must first appreciate the profound mystique that surrounded ancient metalworking. Imagine standing before a copper smelting furnace in 1200 BCE. The scorching desert air shimmers around you as temperatures rise to an unbearable 1200 degrees Celsius inside the stone furnace. Sweat pours down your face as you pump the bellows rhythmically, feeding life-giving air into the roaring flames. The furnace seems alive, breathing, hungry, transforming. You've carefully mixed powdered malachite ore with charcoal, a combination that appears utterly ordinary, like colored dust and black chunks of burnt wood. Yet, something miraculous happens in the heart of this inferno. As the sulfurous fumes make your eyes water and your lungs burn, the ordinary dust transforms. First, it blackens, then glows, and finally, impossibly, beads of brilliant red-orange metal begin to form. Pure copper, a material with properties unlike anything in nature, born from common stone through the mysterious marriage of earth, fire, and air. To ancient peoples, this transformation wasn't merely chemistry, it was supernatural, divine creation. The metallurgist wasn't simply a craftsman but a participant in sacred mystery, wielding the power of the gods to transform the very essence of matter. The distinction between the metallurgist and the deity of metallurgy often blurred, with the craftsman becoming an Ish Elohim, a man-god empowered by divine knowledge. This wasn't just a profession. It was a secret knowledge passed from generation to generation, guarded by initiation rituals and sacred oaths. The ability to transform rock into metal to create tools, weapons, and sacred objects from the bowels of the earth wasn't just technology. It was magic in its most potent form. Yahweh among the gods of the forge, a comparative analysis. Secret number 4. Yahweh shares distinct characteristics with metallurgical deities across cultures. Yahweh is far from the only metallurgical deity in ancient religion. Across cultures, gods of metalworking share distinctive features that appear strikingly in Yahweh's biblical portrayal. In Egypt, Ptah was the creator god and patron of craftsmen, especially metalworkers. Like Yahweh, he created through thought, heart, and word, tongue, a parallel to Genesis, where God speaks creation into existence. Egyptian metalworkers were held in high regard as continuing the god's creative acts on earth. Khnum, although primarily known as the god who fashioned humans from clay on his potter's wheel, was also associated with creation of materials, including metals. The Bible repeatedly uses the potter metaphor for Yahweh, notably in Isaiah 64:8. Yet you, Lord, are our Father. We are the clay, you are the potter, we are all the work of your hand. In Mesopotamia, Enki-Ea was a god of wisdom, water, creation, and craft, including metalworking. He was often portrayed as a Prometheus-like figure who warned humans of divine wrath, similar to how Yahweh warned Noah of the coming flood. The parallel extends to both deities being portrayed as somewhat subversive to the established cosmic order. In the Aegean world, Hephaestus, Vulcan, was the divine smith, forging weapons and tools for gods and heroes. He was often depicted with a limp, a characteristic associated with metallurgical initiation rites across many cultures, including the biblical Jacob's mysterious hip injury after wrestling with a divine being. These parallels might be dismissed as coincidence, if not for the distinctive attributes Yahweh shares specifically with metallurgical deities. Association with mountains and wilderness. Yahweh is repeatedly associated with Mount Sinai, Horeb, Mount Seir, and the wilderness, precisely the locations where copper mining and smelting occurred. Manifestation in fire. Yahweh appears as a burning bush, a pillar of fire, and descends on Sinai in fire and smoke. As Deuteronomy 4:24 declares, "For the Lord your God is a consuming fire." Connection to serpents. Copper mining regions were known for venomous snakes, and serpent imagery is connected to metallurgy across cultures. Moses' bronze serpent, Nehushtan, was worshipped until King Hezekiah's reforms, suggesting an early serpent aspect to Yahweh worship. Transformative power. Yahweh transforms people and nations through refining fire, using metallurgical metaphors throughout the prophetic literature. Biblical metaphors frequently depict Yahweh as a smelter or refiner. See, I have refined you, though not as silver. I have tested you in the furnace of affliction. Isaiah 48 verse 10. Malachi 3:2-3 is even more explicit, for he will be like a refiner's fire or a launderer's soap. He will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. Suppressed scholarship. The voices silenced for challenging orthodoxy. The metallurgical origin of Yahweh isn't a new theory, but it has faced significant resistance from traditional biblical scholarship. Dr. Bet Nissim Amzalag of Ben-Gurion University published groundbreaking research in 2009 establishing Yahweh's metallurgical connections, but his work remains marginalized in mainstream biblical studies despite its strong archaeological and textual foundation. Why such resistance? The metallurgical hypothesis fundamentally challenges the traditional narrative of Israelite religion as uniquely elevated above its pagan neighbors from the beginning. It suggests that monotheism didn't emerge as a sudden, unique revelation, but evolved gradually from polytheistic beginnings, with Yahweh originally being a specialized craft deity rather than a universal creator god. Even more threatening to orthodoxy is the implication that early Yahweh worship included practices later deemed idolatrous: the bronze serpent, sacred pillars, and possibly a divine consort. These elements were systematically removed from official worship during later religious reforms, but their archaeological traces remain. The academic establishment's reluctance to embrace these findings reveals how deeply entrenched theological assumptions can influence supposedly objective historical analysis. Meanwhile, these metallurgical connections explain countless biblical passages that otherwise remain mysterious, from the bronze serpent to the golden calf, from God's manifestation as fire to the temple's bronze furnishings. Yahweh's journey from the smelting furnaces of the southern wilderness to the temple in Jerusalem is a story of remarkable religious evolution, one that continues into his relationship with another surprising deity from across the Mediterranean. As we'll see next, the connections between Yahweh and the Greek god Dionysos reveal an even more astonishing chapter in this divine transformation. Secret number 5. Yahweh and Zeus volcanoes, unexpected Aegean connections. Our journey now takes us across the Mediterranean to the island of Crete, where an extraordinary connection awaits discovery. While mainstream scholars have long maintained that Israelite religion developed in isolation from Aegean influence, archaeological evidence tells a different story. On Crete, ancient inscriptions reveal worship of a deity known as Zeus volcanoes, also called Welchanos or Volcanos. Unlike the familiar Olympian Zeus of later Greek mythology, this earlier Cretan Zeus bears striking similarities to Yahweh. According to renowned classical scholar Jane Ellen Harrison, an ancient hymn to Zeus from Crete addresses him as Kouros, the youthful one, who is the greatest and is at the head of the gods. This Zeus volcanos was portrayed as a divine youth associated with fire, metalworking, and volcanic power. Depictions show him sitting in trees with birds, often eagles, and surrounded by sacred animals. Most tellingly, Zeus volcanos was symbolized by a piece of wood encased in bronze or copper, a representation strikingly similar to the Ark of the Covenant, which contained wooden tablets encased in gold. But how could a Cretan deity have any connection to the God of Israel? The answer lies in the movement of peoples and metallurgical expertise throughout the Mediterranean during the Late Bronze Age. Limestone inscriptions from Palekastro, Crete, circa 1600 to 1500 BCE, depict this young Zeus in ways that parallel descriptions of Yahweh in his southern wilderness manifestations. Both deities are portrayed as masters of transformative fire, both are associated with mountains, and both command storms and lightning. These aren't arbitrary similarities, but point to a shared conceptual framework around metallurgical deities. Even more intriguing, Zeus volcanos was identified as the master or teacher of the smith god Hephaestus, just as Yahweh is portrayed as the master of human metalworkers. This teacher-craftsman relationship appears in both religious traditions and suggests a common origin in the veneration of metallurgical knowledge. The name volcanos itself is likely related to the Roman Vulcan, and ultimately to metallurgical terminology across Indo-European and Semitic languages. This linguistic connection forms another thread in the tapestry of evidence linking these seemingly disparate religious traditions. The undeniable parallels between Yahweh and Dionysos. Even more stunning than the Zeus volcanos connection is the remarkable series of parallels between Yahweh and Dionysos, also called Bacchus, the Greek god of wine, ecstatic ritual, and transformation. While conventional scholarship has dismissed any connection between these deities as coincidental or the product of later Hellenistic influence, the evidence suggests a much deeper, more ancient relationship. Plutarch, writing in the 1st century CE, noted striking similarities between Jewish festivals and Dionysian worship. He observed that the Jewish Feast of Tabernacles featured elements reminiscent of Dionysian rituals. They set up tabernacles of branches and leaves. They carry vine branches and a thyrsus in their hands. Plutarch even suggested that the Jewish Sabbath derived from sabos, the ritual cry of Dionysian worshippers. Tacitus similarly linked Jewish practices to Dionysian worship, noting that their priests sing to the accompaniment of flutes and kettle drums and deck themselves with laurel. These Greco-Roman observations have traditionally been dismissed as uninformed speculation, but they take on new significance when examined alongside the metallurgical origins of both Yahweh and Dionysos. Both deities appear to have emerged from the same conceptual matrix, gods who govern the transformative power of fire, whether in the smelting furnace or the fermentation of wine. The similarities extend far beyond superficial ritual elements. Wine as sacred substance. For Dionysos, wine was his primary sacred substance, the vehicle of divine ecstasy. For Yahweh, wine held similar significance. Numerous biblical passages portray wine as Yahweh's blessing, Amos 9:13-14, Jeremiah 31:5, and its absence as divine punishment. Wine libations were central to temple worship, and Israel itself was symbolized as Yahweh's vineyard, Isaiah 5:7. Serpent symbolism. Dionysos was closely associated with snakes, born in a nest of serpents, and often depicted holding them. Yahweh, similarly, is described by Isaiah as surrounded by seraphim, burning serpents, sends serpents as divine agents, Numbers 21, and was worshipped in serpent form, the Nehushtan, until Hezekiah's reforms. Milk and honey. In Dionysian worship, the miraculous flowing of milk and honey from the ground was considered a divine sign. In Yahweh worship, the land flowing with milk and honey was the defining characteristic of his promised domain. Perpetual flame. Both deities required an eternal flame in their sanctuaries. In Thebes, a perpetual flame burned in Dionysos' temple. In Jerusalem, the eternal fire, Esh-Tamid, burned continuously on Yahweh's altar, as commanded in Exodus 27:20-21. Choral performance. The worship of both deities centered on choral singing. In Greece, choral performance was so tied to Dionysos that the practice was known as the Dionysiac. In Israel, the centrality of choral singing in Yahweh worship is evident throughout the Psalms and in temple practices. These parallels are too numerous and specific to be coincidental. They suggest that Dionysos and Yahweh share a common origin, or at least developed through extensive cross-cultural exchange. The most distinctive shared characteristic, divine ecstasy. The most remarkable similarity between Yahweh and Dionysos lies in their distinctive mode of divine action, the ability to induce uncontrollable ecstatic states in their worshippers. In Greek tradition, Dionysos was renowned for provoking enthusiasm, literally having the god within, a state where his spirit entered a person, transforming them into a bacchant. This state was characterized by music, dance, and sometimes violent frenzy. Compare this to the biblical description in 1 Samuel 10:5-6. You will meet a band of prophets coming down from the high place with harp, tambourine, flute, and lyre before them, prophesying. Then the Spirit of Yahweh will come mightily upon you, and you shall prophesy with them, and be turned into another man. Both traditions describe a deity whose presence induces altered states through music and movement, leading to prophecy or frenzy. Both deities could impart divine madness, not just to individuals but to entire armies, causing confusion and self-destruction among enemies. This shared mode of divine action has no parallel among other Canaanite or Greek deities. El, Baal, Zeus, and Apollo all operate differently. They communicate through dreams, omens, or oracles, but they do not typically possess their worshippers in ecstatic frenzy. The similarity extends even to how both deities were perceived by skeptics. In Euripides' Bacchae, Pentheus doubts Dionysos' divinity, just as Pharaoh in Exodus questions Yahweh's power. In both narratives, the deity proves his reality through devastating displays of power against those who doubt. Secret number 6. The Sea Peoples and the Spread of Metallurgical Religion. How could these extraordinary parallels exist between deities worshipped in regions separated by the Mediterranean Sea? The answer lies in one of ancient history's most mysterious groups, the Sea Peoples. During the Bronze Age collapse, circa 1200 to 1150 BCE, a confederation of maritime raiders, known as the Sea Peoples, caused upheaval throughout the eastern Mediterranean. Archaeological evidence suggests that some of these groups, particularly the Danaan, possibly connected to the tribe of Dan, and the Peliset, Philistines, settled in Canaan after their raids. The Bible itself preserves this connection. The prophet Amos compares the Israelites' exodus from Egypt to the Philistines' migration from Caphtor, Crete. Are you not like the Cushites to me, O people of Israel, says Yahweh? Did I not bring Israel up from the land of Egypt and the Philistines from Caphtor? Amos 9:7. The metallurgical expertise of these sea peoples is well documented. They brought advanced metalworking techniques from the Aegean to the Levant, potentially including religious practices associated with metallurgy. The Philistines established themselves in cities along the coastal plain of Canaan, while evidence suggests the tribe of Dan, associated in biblical narratives with metalworking, may have had Aegean connections. This movement of peoples provides a plausible mechanism for the transmission of religious concepts between the Aegean and the Levant. The metallurgical cults of Yahweh and Dionysos may share common roots in this Bronze Age exchange of technology and religious practice. Further evidence comes from Midianite pottery, which shows clear Aegean motifs despite being found in the southern Levant. Scholars like George Mendenhall and Ben Rothenberg have suggested that the Midianites, the tribe associated with Moses' introduction to Yahweh, may have originated as sea peoples who migrated from the Aegean region. The first plot twist: early Christianity and Dionysian elements. Perhaps the most shocking implication of these parallels appears when we examine early Christianity. Many elements of early Christian practice bear striking similarities to Dionysian worship: the centrality of wine as sacred substance, the Eucharist, the language of divine possession, being filled with the Spirit, and the concept of dying and rising godhood. The Gospel of John, in particular, contains numerous parallels to Dionysian theology. Jesus' first miracle, turning water into wine at Cana, mirrors Dionysos' legendary ability to transform water into wine. Jesus' self-description as the true vine echoes Dionysian imagery, while his promise of abundant life parallels Dionysus' role as a god of vitality and renewal. These similarities led some early church fathers to acknowledge the parallels while claiming that Dionysian worship was a demonic imitation of true religion. Justin Martyr wrote, "When they pagans tell that Bacchus, son of Jupiter, was begotten by Jupiter's intercourse with Semele, was torn in pieces and ascended into heaven. I ask if this does not appear to be identical with what we are told of Jesus? Could Christianity represent not a complete break with ancient Yahwism, but rather a return to some of its earlier, more Dionysian elements that had been suppressed by Jewish religious reforms? This provocative possibility suggests that the worship of Yahweh has undergone multiple transformations throughout history, with certain aspects being emphasized or suppressed in different eras. The evidence presents us with an extraordinary possibility that deep beneath the surface of three major world religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, lies the ancient worship of a metallurgical deity whose original nature and powers have been transformed beyond recognition over millennia of theological evolution. Secret number 7. How a metallurgical deity became the creator god. The most profound transformation in religious history may be how Yahweh evolved from a specialized deity of copper smelters to the omnipotent, omniscient creator god worshipped by billions today. This remarkable metamorphosis didn't happen overnight, but unfolded across centuries through distinct phases of theological development. The first critical transition occurred during the early monarchy of Israel circa 1000 to 900 BCE, when Yahweh began to absorb the attributes and functions of El. This wasn't merely a name change, but a fundamental merger of divine identities. Yahweh, the powerful but specialized metallurgical deity, gradually took on El's cosmic roles: creator of the world, father of humanity, and head of the divine council. We can trace this theological evolution through biblical texts. In earlier layers of poetry, like Judges 5 and Deuteronomy 33, Yahweh is portrayed as a powerful warrior deity coming from the southern wilderness. By contrast, later creation accounts and wisdom literature portray Yahweh with El's characteristics: aged, wise, paternal, and universally sovereign. The critical catalyst for this transformation was likely political. As the Israelite monarchy sought to consolidate power and forge a national identity distinct from their Canaanite neighbors, elevating Yahweh to supreme status served both religious and political purposes. King David's establishment of the Ark in Jerusalem and Solomon's construction of the temple institutionalized Yahweh worship at the center of national life. Later, during the Babylonian exile, 586 to 539 BCE, Israelite religion faced an existential crisis. With the temple destroyed and the people displaced, religious leaders had to explain how the supposedly all-powerful Yahweh could allow such defeat. Their revolutionary answer: Yahweh was not just Israel's national God, but the only true God of all nations, using even foreign empires as instruments of his will. This theological innovation, what scholars call monotheistic revolution, represents the final stage in Yahweh's transformation from metallurgical deity to universal creator. The once specialized god of copper smelters had become the singular divine power governing all of cosmic reality. Traces of ancient worship in modern religious practice. Despite this radical transformation, fascinating traces of Yahweh's metallurgical origins remain embedded in Judaism and Christianity today, hidden in plain sight but recognizable once you know what to look for. In Judaism, the eternal flame, Ner Tamid, that burns perpetually in synagogues, echoes the sacred fire of ancient metallurgical worship. The Havdalah ceremony, marking the end of Shabbat, centers around fire, wine, and spices, elements connected to ancient transformative rituals. Even the Jewish mystical tradition of the Kabbalah, with its emphasis on divine fire and transformative power, may preserve echoes of metallurgical theology. In Christianity, the language of spiritual refinement permeates religious discourse. Refined by fire, tested like gold, purified by trial. The New Testament portrays Jesus as a divine blacksmith in Revelation 1:15, with feet like burnished bronze refined in a furnace. The Holy Spirit's descent at Pentecost as tongues of fire echoes Yahweh's fiery manifestations. In Islam, although further removed from these origins, the ritual circumambulation of the Kaaba centers around a sacred black stone, a meteorite of likely iron-nickel composition, connecting celestial metal to divine presence. These persistent motifs aren't random coincidences, but remnants of ancient understanding, like archaeological layers buried within modern faith traditions. They testify to the remarkable continuity of religious symbolism, even as theological interpretations evolve dramatically. Archaeological discoveries continue to illuminate these connections. Recent excavations at Timnah have revealed metallurgical worship sites with distinct parallels to early Israelite religious practice. A small copper serpent discovered at a 12th century BCE Midianite shrine bears striking resemblance to the biblical Nehushtan, suggesting continuous metallurgical worship traditions that influenced early Yahwism. Plot twist: do secret rituals preserve ancient knowledge? Perhaps the most intriguing possibility is that certain esoteric traditions within Judaism and Christianity deliberately preserve knowledge of Yahweh's metallurgical origins through carefully guarded initiatory practices. Throughout history, metallurgical crafts have been protected by secret societies and guilds, from ancient times through medieval alchemists to early modern Freemasons. These traditions often preserved not just technical knowledge, but theological understandings of the transformative process. Some scholars have suggested that certain Kabbalistic schools, particularly those focused on the creation of the golem, an animated being created from clay, maintained ancient metallurgical theology under the guise of mysticism. The concept of bringing inanimate matter to life through sacred formulas parallels the magical transformation of ore into metal. Similarly, certain Hermetic Christian traditions, particularly those associated with alchemy, may have preserved aspects of metallurgical theology while reinterpreting them through a Christian lens. The alchemical quest to transform base metals into gold can be seen as a metaphor for spiritual transformation, but it may also preserve echoes of actual metallurgical practice and its associated theology. Could hidden lineages of initiated practitioners have maintained awareness of Yahweh's origins, even as mainstream religious authorities obscured them? The possibility cannot be dismissed, especially given the remarkable persistence of metallurgical imagery in religious mysticism across traditions. Implications for modern religious understanding. What does this metallurgical origin mean for believers today? Does identifying Yahweh's beginnings as a specialized craft deity somehow diminish his significance or undermine religious faith? Rather than threatening faith, this deeper understanding of divine origins potentially enriches it. The evolution from metallurgical deity to universal creator reflects humanity's expanding consciousness, our growing capacity to perceive divine reality in increasingly comprehensive ways. There's profound beauty in recognizing how a God once worshipped for specific transformative powers came to be understood as the source of all transformation. The smelter's furnace becomes a metaphor for cosmic creation. The metallurgist's skill becomes divine wisdom, ordering the universe. This evolutionary view of religion helps explain the multi-layered nature of sacred texts. Rather than expecting theological consistency throughout the Bible, we can appreciate how different passages reflect different stages in the development of religious understanding. from the fiery wilderness deity of early poetry to the majestic creator of later wisdom literature. Most importantly, this perspective bridges the artificial divide between revealed religion and human cultural development. Divine revelation becomes not a one-time delivery of complete truth, but an ongoing dialogue between human consciousness and transcendent reality, with each culture and era contributing to an unfolding understanding of the divine. The transformation of Yahweh from metallurgical deity to universal creator may be the greatest story never fully told until now. It reminds us that religious understanding, like the metals formed in the ancient furnace, emerges through a process of transformation, requiring both divine fire and human participation in bringing new forms of consciousness into being. The next time you encounter religious symbolism involving fire, transformation, or purification, remember that you're touching perhaps the oldest continuous religious tradition on earth, one that began with the mysterious, fiery birth of metal from stone and evolved into humanity's most profound conceptions of ultimate reality. The journey from the smelting furnace to the sanctuaries of world religion is not a denial of divine reality, but a testament to humanity's enduring quest to understand and connect with the transformative power at the heart of existence. As we've journeyed through the ancient origins of Yahweh, from humble metallurgical beginnings to the supreme deity of three world religions, we uncover a profound truth that extends beyond theology into our own lives. This revelation isn't about diminishing faith, but enriching our understanding of how human knowledge evolves. Like Yahweh's transformation from a specialized deity to universal creator, our own understanding of life's deepest truths evolves through experience. We often discover that our most profound beliefs began as simpler notions that transformed through our life journey into more complex, nuanced understandings. Think about how your understanding of love, purpose, or success has evolved since your youth. What once seemed straightforward, career achievements, material possessions, social status, likely gave way to deeper appreciations of connection, contribution, and meaning. This evolution doesn't invalidate your earlier perspectives, but builds upon them, creating richer, more comprehensive wisdom. The same process that transformed Yahweh, gradual integration of new insights while preserving essential truths, mirrors how our own wisdom develops through decades of life experience. We don't abandon our core values, we refine and expand them as our horizons broaden. In a world increasingly divided by absolutist thinking, the story of Yahweh's evolution reminds us that growth comes through synthesis rather than rejection. Our current understanding isn't the final destination, but one point in an ongoing journey. The humility to recognize this opens us to deeper connections with ourselves, others, and perhaps even the divine, however we conceive it. The ancient metallurgists knew something profound. Transformation requires both heat and patience. May we approach our own beliefs with the same respect for process, allowing truth to emerge, refine, and evolve throughout our lifetime. If this exploration of Yahweh's forbidden origins has challenged your understanding or sparked your curiosity, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What aspects of this journey resonated most with you? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the hidden histories that shape our religious and cultural understanding. New videos exploring other ancient mysteries are released every month. If you found value in this video, please consider sharing it with friends or family members who appreciate thought-provoking discussions about history and faith. And if you've enjoyed this content, hitting that like button truly helps our channel reach more curious minds. Thanks for joining me on this incredible journey through time, and I'll see you in the next exploration of our shared human past.